The diner smelled of coffee, butter, and rain-soaked pavement, that particular scent of warmth meeting cold. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows, smearing the reflections of neon lights across the glass. Inside, the world was still, slow, and soft. The hum of the old refrigerator mingled with the faint music from the jukebox, something old and sweet, a tune no one had requested in years. Mark Reynolds sat in his favorite booth by the window, his hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. The steam curled upward, fogging the lower part of his glasses. He'd been coming here for as long as he could remember, stopping in after long shifts or during days when the silence of his empty house felt too loud. The waitress, Denise, always kept his cup full without asking. She knew the drill: coffee, pancakes, and quiet. He had just finished cutting into his second pancake when the bell above the door jingled softly. A gust of damp air slipped in, followed by a woman and a little girl. The woman's hair clung wetly to her cheeks, and her coat was so thin it looked more like a sweater. The little girl held a broken umbrella, its fabric torn and dripping, and she clutched it as if it were something precious. They didn't look around. The woman moved with a quiet urgency, guiding her daughter to a booth near the door, the one farthest from the light. Mark noticed how she kept her head down, how she tried to fold her body smaller, as though she could make herself disappear. Denise walked over, pen and pad in hand. The woman spoke in a low voice, barely audible over the hum of the diner. Denise nodded, her expression softening before she disappeared behind the counter. When she returned, she carried a mug of coffee and a single slice of toast. That was it. The woman smiled faintly, though her eyes looked tired. She tore the toast in half and handed one piece to her daughter. The little girl accepted it with both hands, as if it were something special. She nibbled at the corner and swung her legs beneath the table, her shoes too big and scuffed at the toes. Mark glanced down at his own plate. Stacked pancakes, crisp bacon, scrambled eggs glistening with butter. He looked back at them. The mother hadn't touched her coffee. She was just holding it, staring into the dark surface like she was somewhere else entirely. He didn't want to stare, but something about them, the quiet, the carefulness, tugged at him. They weren't just passing through, that much was clear. They were running from something. He recognized that look. His sister had worn it years ago, before she vanished with her baby in the middle of a night filled with shouting and broken glass. Denise came by to refill his mug. "You know them?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No, but I can guess. They came in about an hour ago. Said the bus got cancelled 'cause of the storm. I offered them something warm, but she only wanted toast and coffee. Didn't even have enough for that." Mark frowned. "You let her pay." "I told her not to worry about it. She still left a few coins on the table." Denise sighed. "Pride's a stubborn thing." He nodded. Pride, he understood that word too well. It could feed you for a while, even when your stomach was empty. He tried to turn his attention back to his food, but the words kept circling his mind. The girl was maybe 6 or 7. Too young to know the taste of hunger, too small to carry the weight of her mother's silence. When Mark looked again, the woman was gathering her things, an old purse, the broken umbrella, a small bag that looked half empty. She lifted her daughter's coat onto her shoulders and whispered something. The girl nodded, obedient, her tiny hand slipping into her mother's. They moved toward the door quietly, hoping to vanish between heartbeats, unnoticed and unseen. Mark should have let them go. He didn't owe them anything. But as they passed his booth, the little girl turned her head. For just an instant, her eyes met his. They were big, hazel, and full of something he couldn't quite name. Curiosity, maybe, or longing, or maybe just hunger. Her gaze fell on his plate, on the bacon and pancakes she hadn't tasted in who knows how long. She didn't reach out or say a word, but the way she looked, that silent pause, that tiny flicker of want, struck him harder than any plea could have. Mark felt something twist in his chest. It was sudden and sharp, the kind of ache that came from too many years of keeping the world at arm's length. He saw his niece again in his mind, her small face lit by the glow of the dashboard, her voice asking if her mom was okay. He remembered the helplessness of not being able to answer. "Hey," he called before he could stop himself. The woman froze, her hand tightening around the girl's. She turned slowly, eyes wary. "Yes." Mark rose from his seat, holding up a napkin. "You drop this," he said. The lie sounded awkward, even to him. The napkin hadn't been hers. She blinked, confused. "I don't think." "Storm's rough," he interrupted gently, taking a step closer. "Why don't you two sit for a bit? Let me buy the little one something warm to eat." Her posture stiffened. "That's kind, but we really need to go. It's just food, he said, his voice steady, quiet. No strings, I promise. The little girl looked up at her mother, then tugged lightly on her sleeve. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were pleading. The woman hesitated, torn between pride and need. Finally, her shoulders dropped. Just for a minute, she murmured. They returned to their booth. Mark signaled Denise with a nod, and within minutes, another plate arrived, pancakes, eggs, a mug of hot cocoa with whipped cream piled on top. The smell alone seemed to change the air around them. The girl's face lit up, pure joy blooming across her features as she reached for the mug. It's so warm, she whispered, holding it carefully with both hands. She took a sip and giggled when the cream touched her nose. Mark smiled but didn't say anything. He turned slightly away, letting them eat in peace. But every so often, he glanced up. The mother still wasn't eating much, just watching her daughter with a soft, trembling smile. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Don't mention it. Outside, the rain continued to fall, tapping gently against the windows. Inside, for the first time that day, the air felt different, warmer, lighter. Mark watched as the little girl laughed at the foam in her cocoa, as the woman's hands steadied, as color returned to their faces. Something small and quiet had shifted in the world. A moment of kindness, maybe. Or the start of something more. He didn't know their story, didn't even know their names. But as he sipped his coffee and listened to the rain, he knew one thing for certain, he was glad he'd looked up. The storm finally let up by evening, leaving the streets slick and shining under the bruised sky. The last of the clouds drifted past the diner's flickering neon sign, painting the puddles outside in streaks of pink and blue. Inside, the lights glowed soft and golden, reflecting off the half-empty coffee cups and clean plates. The air smelled of syrup, soap, and rain, that familiar end-of-day mix that somehow always felt like both an ending and a beginning. Anna sat across from Mark, her daughter curled up beside her, resting her head against her arm. Lily was still half awake, her cheeks flushed and sticky from syrup, her lashes fluttering as she fought sleep. The plate before her was nearly empty now, just a few crumbs left, a smear of chocolate from the cocoa on the napkin. Mark stirred his coffee slowly, letting the spoon clink against the sides of the mug. He wasn't sure what to say. He'd seen people come and go from this diner for years, truckers, drifters, folks down on luck, but this felt different. Maybe it was the way the woman kept glancing toward the window, the way she seemed caught between gratitude and fear. Or maybe it was the way the little girl had smiled at her food like it was the best thing in the world. Say thank you, Lily, Anna whispered softly. The little girl blinked herself awake and turned toward him. Thank you, mister, she said, her voice shy and sleepy. Mark smiled. You're very welcome, sweetheart. He watched her for a moment, then looked at Anna. You two got a place to stay tonight? He asked quietly. She hesitated, brushing a strand of damp hair behind her ear. The bus station said the next bus isn't until morning. We'll wait there. He frowned. You'll freeze. It's barely heated this time of year. Anna's gaze dropped to her hands, the chipped polish on her nails. We've managed worse. There was no bitterness in her tone, just exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding things together for too long. Mark hesitated, then said, there's a motel down the road. It's not fancy, but I could. She shook her head before he could finish. You've already done enough. Please, I can't take more. Her words were soft, but they carried weight. Pride again, just like Denise had said. Pride and fear, holding her together like fragile glue. Mark nodded slowly, not wanting to push her. All right, I get it. Silence stretched between them for a while, broken only by the low hum of the diner's lights and the occasional clatter from the kitchen. The world outside looked peaceful now, though the storm's edge still lingered in the wind. After a long pause, Anna spoke again, her voice hesitant. We were supposed to catch the 3:15 bus out of town. My brother, he said he'd help us get on our feet. But the bus broke down an hour outside the city, and then, she sighed, shaking her head. We've been trying to make it the rest of the way since last night. Mark nodded. That's rough. You're heading far. Just a few towns over. He found us a small place to rent. Said he could cover the deposit. Her smile flickered for a moment before fading. I didn't think it would be this hard. Her fingers brushed her daughter's hair absently, the gesture automatic and full of tenderness. Lily had fallen asleep completely now, her small breaths steady and warm. Mark leaned back in his seat. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Getting out, starting over. She looked at him sharply, her eyes searching his face. You don't even know what I left. I don't need to, he replied. I can guess. Her eyes softened at that, and she looked away. I thought I was strong, she whispered. But the truth is, I was just scared. Every day. For her. For me. She glanced down at her sleeping daughter. I used to think staying was the brave thing. But it wasn't. Leaving was. Mark nodded slowly, his throat tightening. Yeah, he said. Sometimes walking away takes everything you've got. They sat in silence again, listening to the rain begin to patter lightly against the window once more. The sound filled the space between them, gentle and steady. It wasn't awkward, just quiet, like two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Denise came by with the check, but Mark caught it before Anna could reach for her bag. He slipped his card under it quickly, giving the waitress a small shake of his head. Anna frowned. You don't have to. I said no strings, Mark interrupted, offering a small smile. But that doesn't mean I can't pay for good company. She laughed softly then, the sound catching him off guard. It was quiet and tired, but there was something light in it, something that hadn't been there before. You're impossible, she said. He shrugged. I get that a lot. When they finally stepped outside, the air was cool and damp, the world washed clean by the rain. The pavement glistened under the diner's flickering lights. Mark opened the passenger door of his old pickup truck and nodded toward it. Come on, I'll drive you to the bus station. It's a long walk. Anna hesitated, looking at the sleeping girl in her arms, then at him. You don't have to. I know, he said simply. Something in his tone made her nod. She climbed in carefully, tucking Lily against her shoulder. Mark closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. The truck rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the mist. They drove in silence at first. The streets were empty, the world hushed in that strange peace that comes after a storm. Streetlights glowed through the fog, each one passing like a heartbeat. After a few minutes, Anna spoke softly. You didn't have to stop us, you know. Back at the diner. I know, Mark said, eyes on the road. But I'm glad I did. She looked out the window, her reflection flickering between raindrops. People don't usually notice, she said. Most just look past us. I used to do that, Mark admitted. Didn't realize how easy it is to miss someone who really needs help. When they reached the small bus station at the edge of town, the lights inside were dim, the sign flickering just like the diner's. Mark parked out front and turned to her. You sure your brother's meeting you? He said he'd try, she said quietly. But if not, we'll wait till morning. Mark nodded, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My number, he said, handing it to her. And a little cash, just in case he doesn't show. Anna stared at it, shaking her head. I can't. You can, he interrupted gently. If it helps you get where you need to go, that's all that matters. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the soft glow of the dashboard. You're a good man, Mark. He gave a small, almost sad smile. Just someone who remembers what it's like to need a hand. She tucked the paper into her bag, then leaned over and pressed his hand lightly. Thank you, she whispered. For seeing us. He nodded, unable to find words. She stepped out, the cold mist catching in her hair. Lily stirred against her shoulder but didn't wake. At the door, Anna turned one last time. Good night, he said softly. As she disappeared into the station, Lily lifted her head just long enough to wave sleepily through the glass. Bye, mister. Mark smiled. Bye, kiddo. He waited until they were gone, until the station door closed behind them, before driving off. The rain started again, a quiet drizzle against the windshield. He didn't know if he'd ever see them again. Maybe her brother would find them. Maybe she'd find the peace she was chasing. But as he drove down the empty street, the faint warmth of her thanks lingered like a small light in the darkness, a reminder that sometimes the smallest kindness could be the thing that keeps someone from breaking.